Well, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for this month's leadership video. We're so excited to be able to share with you some principles about growing and about breaking barriers. So last week I actually got an article from our ARC leadership that was all about breaking the 500 barrier was actually the title of the article. But really it wasn't about any particular number. It was the idea that all of us at some point find ourselves bumping up against some kind of ceiling, some kind of a wall, and that could be true in our work, that can be true in our small group ministry, that could be true in team ministry, that could be true in our church life as a whole. And so these are some principles that are going to help us really understand how we push past those obstacles, those struggles, those barriers that oftentimes hinder us from really growing into the team, the group, the church that we want to be. So here's what I want you to see first and foremost, and that is wherever you are, the length of time that you have been there is going to kind of dictate how much longer you're gonna have to stay. And in other words, if you've been stuck for a couple of years, chances are, unless you've been really actively and intentionally working on it, it's going to take you a little bit of time now to build momentum, to create movement, and then finally to get out of that space. So whatever you do, the first thing I want you to hear me say on the onset is don't get discouraged. Don't give up. Remember, Galatians 6:9 says that at just the right time, we reap a harvest of righteousness. In other words, it pays off if, and the Bible says this specifically, you don't give up. Number one. Secondly, I want you to understand that probably what got you where you are isn't going to get you where you need to be. And this is not some kind of profound, staggering leadership principle. This is something that we've understood for a long time. In other words, whatever it was you did to get yourself to a group of 10, or maybe if you're a small group coach, to get yourself to multiply one small group, or for us as a church, whatever it was that got us to a church of 450, something's going to have to shift or migrate or change, or you're going to have to push on something that you weren't pushing on before in a new way in order to get to that next level where you're multiplying your group, where you're growing your team past 10, where you're growing your anchor group into a hub of whatever area of ministry that you're interested in doing. And the other thing that I want you to see is you've got to become a master as you want to grow yourself, because you oftentimes don't have a lot more time, energy, talent that you can throw into something. So if you're feeling stuck and exhausted, the idea of how am I going to do more can sometimes be overwhelming. Well, first of all, understand that sometimes we need to work harder. Sometimes we just need to work smarter. And we'll kind of get into that a little bit more. But the number one thing you can do is multiply yourself. Remember, here at The Well, our strategy is what we call GEM. Grow, engage, multiply. So we grow through growing our teams, growing our groups, growing our church, first of all spiritually and then relationally. And we believe that the byproduct of health, which is brought on by a healthy spiritual life and a healthy relational life, that the byproduct of that is that we'll grow numerically. Then we all engage the mission. And we do that through both serving and outreach, both of which is critical. But ultimately, the end goal, the end result of our strategy is that M, multiplying the life of the leader. And so you can oftentimes grow a group or a team to a certain size just by sheer force of will or by the character who is leading the group, but at some point that just burns out. It gets too thin. And you have to, instead of trying to just lead people, you have to learn to lead through people. So you want to be conscious about raising up people in your teams to do specific tasks like schedule or recruit or train, or maybe the person who's doing all of the operations and logistics in the background. You want to start raising up in your small group prayer leaders or people who could lead or facilitate the discussion when you're not there, people who could host or make people feel comfortable, people who could lead in all kinds of different ways, and you want to begin to learn to lead through them. The second thing I want you to see is that every new level requires a change. Something's going to have to change. People don't really mind change, although they're kind of resistant to it. It's really the process of change that they don't like. And that's why it's at the onset of change that people usually begin to push back. It's where they usually begin to resist. But if you're not willing to sacrifice in order to get to where you want as a team, as a group, as a church, then not changing, not growing is going to be the sacrifice that you make. So understand, there's going to be a sacrifice. You're either going to sacrifice to grow and advance, or you're going to sacrifice because you're not going to grow and advance. And there are 6 phases that a team, that a business, even that a family, group, whatever, is going to go through. And so the first one is launch. That's when you kind of begin. That's a honeymoon phase, and we all get those, and those are awesome. And it doesn't matter if you're in a group that's been around since the inception of small groups at the Well, or you're in a group that just formed at the beginning of this last semester. The reality is every group, every team, every church, every organization, every business had a launch day, and they got that honeymoon season. The second phase is actually called utopia, and it's when everything is going right, but the reality is you don't know why things are going right. When the church was small, we just loved getting together, we loved being around one another, we loved the natural, organic nature of the church, but we really didn't necessarily understand what it was that we liked. And the problem is that when you don't really understand what it is that you like or love or what you're enjoying, then when things start to go wrong, you really don't know what to fix. So in that phase, you want to pay attention to really what's working and why it's working, because the next phase is called the whirlwind. And in the whirlwind, that's where you end up going round and round and round and round and round. So it might look like this. You have a team of 8 people, and you'll swell up to 10 or maybe 11 people on your team, and then you end up losing 2 or 3, and you're right back down at 8. Maybe you have a small group that swells up to 12 people, and it looks like you're going to multiply it, and then all of a sudden it shrinks back down to 7. And there's just this sort of ebb and flow. It can happen in a church or in an organization, where a church like our size swells up to about 550 and then fades back down to 450, and you just find yourself in this thing. And when you find yourself in the whirlwind, it's really, really important that you realize that's where you get stuck. If you're stuck, chances are, as a team, as a group, as an organization, you're stuck in whirlwind. Now, the next place that happens oftentimes in a business as they break through that whirlwind, as they break through that cycle, is that they hit what's called increase. Now, this is where you're constantly, steadily growing, increasing, and we've had seasons like that at the church. You've had seasons like that in your small group, and this is really where you want to be, but it's a very tough place to balance, because if you're pushing too hard, you kind of slip past increase, and you end up in what's called merry-go-round. Now here's the thing, the whirlwind and the merry-go-round have that same idea, that you're in a cycle, but instead of being where the whirlwind is a cycle as you're pushing up, the merry-go-round is kind of a cycle as you're falling down. And that's when everything you're doing feels like you're just stuck in a loop. It's where everything feels like a rut. You maybe aren't expanding and contracting. Maybe you're just flat. You're just locked in at 8 people. You're just locked in as one small group, and semester after semester goes, nothing changes. It's just, you could just put the whole thing on autopilot and it would keep doing its thing. And that ultimately leads to slow death. Once you kind of get to the place where nothing's happening and everything is predictable, then the inevitable end to that is decline. Decline of your small group, decline of your team, decline of your church, decline of your organization. And so it's important that you think about, where are you, where is your group, where is your team within that cycle, and understanding that everyone is going to go through each of these cycles at some point. All churches die, all teams end, all small groups multiply at some point, or they just head in their separate directions. So everyone is going to experience these. These aren't bad, these are a life cycle, just like we go through in our life. But understanding where we are will help us get to where we want to be within that life cycle, which for most of us is increase. Most of us, it's growth. So the first thing that you can do if you're stuck in that whirlwind or that merry-go-round is change what you believe is possible. Now, what I mean by that is not find the things that you can change and change. I mean, you actually have to change your thinking. You have to change what you believe is possible. Some of you are in a ministry and you think this is as big as it can get. Some of you are in a group and you think this group just can't multiply. Some of you are working with people and you think this person's never going to move. Some of you are in a church and you think this church isn't going to grow. And you have to change what you believe is possible, because here's the thing, it's not until you're convinced with all of your heart what can happen that you're really going to put the effort, the energy, and the sacrifice into it that it's really going to require. And then the second thing you're going to have to do is you're going to have to change the way you structure. There are ultimately two things that impact growth and health of something, and that is your structure and your strategy. Now, for us, strategy is it's the way that we are approaching people. It's what drives our culture. It's our gem, growing, engaging, and multiplying. Your structure deals with your leadership, how you are using your leadership, how you are raising people up into leadership, how you're developing them, and how you're ultimately leading through them. And so the number one thing you've got to be thinking about is, who is it that I'm spending my time with? You should be spending with the majority of your time with your biggest producers. Now, they may not be your best friends. They may not be the people that you have the most natural affinity with or for. But you should be spending the majority of your time with those key people who really are moving and shaking and getting things done. And then the other thing is, anything that can be done at 70% the level, the capacity that you would do it on an upward trend, you should be turning over. So if you've got someone on your team who can schedule at 70% your level and they're getting better, they should be doing the scheduling. If you've got someone who can recruit at 70% your level and they're getting better at it, they should be doing the recruiting. If you've got someone who can facilitate the discussion at 70% your level, they should be facilitating the discussion. Whatever it is in your sphere, in your orbit, in your area, in your organization that someone else could be doing, you should be letting them do. Remember, God gave the ministry gift, leadership, to the church to equip them for works of service. That means if we're doing what someone else could be doing, we're really robbing from them. And so we might have to change our structure, our thinking about our leadership and how we lead through people. The next thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to change how we spend our time. You're going to have to really evaluate how you spend your time. Every year, at the first of the year, I go through and redo my weekly schedule to make sure I'm still happy about the way I spend my time and that I'm spending my time on the things that are the most important. And you have to put those most important things in first and then let everything else kind of flow around them. And every year, you'll end up getting rid of some good things that just aren't the best things. And remember, you're either going to sacrifice on the front to experience growth, or you're going to sacrifice growth because you wouldn't sacrifice on the front. And next, you want to change your approach to be more culture-driven. And what I mean by that is, oftentimes we think about content and excellence. So maybe you're in a team and you just want to be the best. Maybe you're in a small group and you're just thinking about really good material and information for people in their groups. But ultimately, people don't come to your small group because they want to, be the smartest person in the church. And most people don't join your team because they want to be a part of the coolest team or the best team or the most excellent or the cleanest team or whatever. They join those for community and for culture. And so you have to be culture-driven when you're thinking about that, which means you also have to be intentional about your language, because language drives culture. Talking about the mission, talking about the values, talking about the strategy, and letting those things get pushed all the way down in to the basic, to the entry level, so that people understand they're part of something bigger, something larger, something important, something that's on the move, something that's growing and winning. The next one is you want to become fixed on the mission. No matter what you're doing, whether you're a small group, whether you're a dream team, you should know the mission of the church, which is we love people into deeper levels of relationship with Jesus Christ. Which means if you're on the cleaning team, the real purpose of what you're doing is not cleaning the building. The real purpose of what you're doing is loving people into a deeper level of relationship with Jesus. And that starts with the cleaning team. You're loving that team into a deeper level of relationship. And then that team is trying to figure out how what they're doing is loving people in. And finally, we want alignment and not agreement. Now, what do I mean by that? All of us have people on our team or in our group or on our staff who agree with us. In other words, they'll take their marching orders and kind of get in line. But that's not what you want. You don't want people who at the end of the day will say, fine. What we want is alignment. We want people who get it. They have internalized the mission and the values and the strategy themselves. They know them inside, and now those things inform their decision making. And so then if they took off running and we took off running at the same time, we would be in alignment because now we're both running in the same direction. So just to rehearse those really fast, number one, you're going to have to change what you believe is possible. Number two, you're going to have to change the way you structure, which means you're going to have to change the way you think about leadership and the people in your groups. Number three, the way you spend your time. Number four, you're going to have to become culture-driven, not content or excellence-driven. Number five, be fixated on the mission. And finally, six, work for alignment and not agreement. Well, if you have any questions, feel free to email me, jerry@cometothewell.org. You can give us a call at the office, 630-262-1083, or you can post a comment and we'll follow up with you. We hope that you are subscribed to our YouTube channel, and if you're not, go ahead and do that and hit that notification bell. Then you'll always know anytime something new is getting posted. And in the meantime, we hope that we get to see you this weekend at one of our worship experiences. Thanks so much. Have a great day.